Hi, my name's Mark Ragucci, and I am a survivor of an aortic dissection that happened in 1999. So it's roughly approximately 24 years ago. And um, it was a type A dissection that I had. It began during a workout when I was lifting weights. And pretty much what happened is that I had serious substernal chest pain, and it took about maybe 45 minutes to go away, and then it got better. And I went in the locker room, and I don't know exactly what was going on. A little bit more of background in me is that I actually am a physician and I practice in New York City. I was currently in Chicago at the time of my dissection, and I had, I was in my internship. I had worked approximately, you know, give or take 30 hours or so without any sleep. And pretty much I went to the gym to kind of wind myself down because that's what it is that I usually do to relax a little bit. And so, for the most part, what happened was that I had serious chest pain and I had actually admitted a lot of people with chest pain over the course of the day that I actually was, or day and night. Um, I was working in the internal medicine unit. Like I said, it was just kind of a crazy day because it was around right around the New Year's, and so for the most part, there was a lot of people that came in with quote unquote holiday hearts, meaning that they actually had a lot of issues as relationship to over drinking and over indulging, possible drug use, etc. It was an inner city hospital that I was working at. So fast forward, I ended up, there was a snowstorm that happened the night before, and somebody, one of my colleagues gave me a ride back home that, and I walked up to the gym. The gym was about maybe, give or take 3/4 of a mile or a half a mile, and through the snow banks. And then I actually walked back home after I felt better. And so, I'm saying to myself, there's something funny. I don't know what the hell is going on. So I ended up uh, trying. My wife is also a physician, and we were both interns at the time. She was working in Indiana at a hospital in Indiana, and so I paged her at the time. There was no such thing as cell phones. The only thing that you could do is you could do like paging. And so I paged her and no response because she was busy, obviously. So what I did is that afterwards I called my mother. I described the situation to her, and she said, "You know what? Why don't you actually just call 911? I know you feel better now, but why don't you call 911 because you seem like you're a little bit disturbed about this situation." I said, "Okay, I kind of feel silly and stupid," but I ended up just calling. And they immediately came to the house. I walked downstairs, and then pretty much what it came down to is that I ended up, like I said, I was kind of embarrassed at the time, figuring that it was nothing. When it was that they, uh, you know, drove me to the hospital. It was a little community hospital right outside of Chicago, and then which was the closest hospital. The emergency room doc, who I forget his name, I probably should remember his name because he basically saved my life. He said, "You know what? I don't like how your EKG looks. And I also don't like how it is that you have an increased white blood cell count. A normal white blood cell count is from 5 to 10, and I was approximately 18 or 19. And he said, everything else is okay. And for the most part, we're going to admit you to the rule out myocardial infarction protocol. And after that, I saw somebody who was a cardiologist. The cardiologist did an echocardiogram. The echocardiogram showed that I actually had a aortic, it was a dissection, but it wasn't really apparent on the aortic echocardiogram. I just had uh, a, a, a widened aortic valve. And so she sent me for a CT of the chest and abdomen, and it did confirm the diagnosis of the aortic dissection. It was an ascending dissection that arose from the innominate artery down, and actually it passed into the right coronary cusp. And so it was probably about maybe 11:30 in the evening by the time the diagnosis was made. So I was transferred to in a Chicago hospital, and then I had the dissection repair. And I remember speaking to the surgeon who first operated on me, and he said, "We're going to do the best to preserve your valve, but we might have to replace it." I said, "Look, you know what? Do what it is that you have to do, and just call it a wash." And he said, "Okay, fine." And afterwards, when it is that I woke up, it was a relatively uncomplicated course that after the first surgery. And I returned to work approximately 6 weeks later. There's no such thing as somebody who's a part-time physician. You can't, you have to, our part-time intern, you have to actually work or not work. I figured that, I just started residency, and I may as well just, figure out what's going on. So I ended up moving to New York to do my physical medicine and rehab residency after my internship I was delayed by approximately a month. My internship took another month in addition to the internship. And so I saw a cardiologist and an internist at the place where I work at NYU. And I'm still to this day at NYU as an attending physician. The cardiologist that I was following with, she did echocardiograms, and it was a successful repair. But there was imaging studies that were done, and there was dilatation of the aortic root. And so with residual dissection in the aorta. So I searched around for other physicians and surgeons that could actually do this sort of thing. And I didn't want to have surgery at the institution where I was working. And so what it is that I did is I did the surgery at Mount Sinai, which was a little bit uptown. Complications arose afterwards. The surgeon, when I talked to him, the second surgeon, he said that everything was routine, everything seemed to be well, and after the initial surgery, and I had a complex. It's called something called a Bentall procedure, which is an aortic reconstruction, which is a complicated surgery, which is approximately, I believe it was like in the OR for 8 hours or so the first time, and the second time I was in the OR for about 12 hours. The surgeon said that, and my family has said that everything's, the surgeon actually, everything seemed to be uncomplicated. However, I had some seizure-like activity and afterwards, and then I ended up transferring to Columbia Presbyterian right around like just before Christmas on the 22nd or 20, 21st of December and 2001. So it was really about maybe, give or take a little bit less than 2 years after the initial dissection. And so when it is that I arrived at the neuro ICU, I actually, the neurosurgeons talked to my family or I'm sorry, the neurologist that was taking care of me talked to my family and said that, look, at your son is, and your husband is in not in good shape, and for the most part, the prognosis was listed as something that was dismal and not really favorable. Eventually, roundabout like the middle of January, that's when I kind of like woke up after they took off some of the anti-epileptic drugs, the anti-seizure medications. Afterwards, I ended up going to NYU Rusk Institute for Rehabilitation. And so the entire course, so obviously I was at the time, I was a senior resident, and the senior, and I was able to actually complete my residency. I needed to do give or take 8 months of residual residency training. And then I did approximately 2 years of rehabilitation myself, because I ended up having something called man in a barrel or brachial diplegia, which means that your legs seem to work fine, but your arms are not really that functional. I ended up making a really good recovery, and then I went back to work. And, you know, for the most part, that's really my story in terms of it in a nutshell. I could tell you a lot bit more about the struggles that I had with rehabilitation and everything associated with how it is that going back to work. But I had it in my mind that, you know what, I may as well just shoot for the moon and see what it is that I can do. And the worst thing that's going to happen is I'll just stay on disability, and that's it. So I ended up just pursuing and perseverating on making sure that I was able to recover to the best ability that I could. And that the chairman of the department at the time, he actually said that, look, at, you know what, I want you to work here, and I think you actually have a remarkable story, and for the most part, you're somebody who actually we want to have on faculty here. And this was in 2004 when it is that I joined faculty in NYU after I completed my residency. That's really about the story in a nutshell, and thank you very much for listening to my story.